how do you know, like, instantly that a chair is different from a table? Or, a cat from a dog? It seems completely effortless, doesn't it? But that immediate recognition that way we sort and understand the world, it's actually a really profound act of cognition. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're cutting straight to the chase on a study that asks a pretty mind-bending question. It explores whether our most advanced AIs, large language models, multimodal LLMs, can they actually think about objects in a way that kind of echoes our own brains? It's a really fascinating look at the architecture of understanding itself. So our mission here in this deep dive is to unpack the evidence. And it's compelling stuff. Not just can these AI models develop human-like ways of representing objects, but how closely do those representations actually align with what's happening, inside your own head?
Yeah.
Get ready for some pretty eye-opening connections that'll shortcut you to being really well informed on this.
Okay, so let's peel back the layers on this then. I mean, at its core, this ability we have, categorizing objects,
Oh,
conceptualizing.
fundamental. Yeah, exactly. Knowing a car is a car, whether it's, brand new or totally beat up, it affects everything. How we perceive things, the decisions we make.
And our brains are constantly doing it, right?
Yeah.
Making these structured comparisons, forming categories, organizing all that knowledge.
Yeah.
And what's really fascinating here is that cognitive neuroscientists, they've been trying for a long time to figure out the sort of dimensions that organize these mental maps in humans. You could think of them as underlying features, like is it an animal versus not an animal, natural versus man-made, even big versus small.
Right, those basic distinctions.
Exactly. And this study took a really clever approach to see if AI models, well, if they do something similar.
Which naturally leads to the big question. These incredibly powerful AIs like ChatGPT 3.5 or the multimodal ones like Gemini Pro Vision 1.0, can they actually develop these same kind of human-like object representations just from all the text and images they learn from?
And if they can, how does that even work? How are they building that conceptual structure?
It almost sounds like science fiction, doesn't it? How would you even start to measure an AI's quote-unquote mental representation of something like a chair?
Yeah, it does sound a bit out there. But the researchers actually used a pretty well-established method from cognitive psychology. They adapted something called the triplet odd one out task.
Okay, what's that?
Imagine I show you three things. Say, an apple, a banana, and a car. And I ask, which one is the odd one out?
Okay, yeah, the car, instantly.
Exactly. Your brain just knows. So the brilliant part here is they took that same simple task and applied it to the LLMs and the MLLMs.
So they're basically playing which one of these things is not like the others, but with these, advanced AIs. That sounds like a huge undertaking.
Oh, it was.
How many objects, how many decisions are we talking about?
They used a really diverse set, 1,854 unique natural objects from a database called Things.
Okay.
And get this, they collected a staggering 4.7 million triplet judgments.
Ooh.
Yeah, from the AI models and from human participants for comparison.
4.7 million. That's just an enormous amount of data. How do they even begin to make sense of all those choices?
Right, you need some serious analytical power. They used a specific representation learning method. It's called SPOSI.
SPOSI.
Yeah, sparse positive similarity embedding. But think of it like this. It takes all those millions of odd one-out choices, and it boils them down into a kind of condensed fingerprint for each object, a low-dimensional map.
Okay, like finding the core features.
Exactly. The goal was to identify 66 core dimensions that capture the similarity structure between all these objects.
And did it work? Were these fingerprints, these dimensions actually meaningful?
Remarkably so.
Yeah.
The first check was just, are these results stable? And they were, across multiple runs. And they were highly predictive. They really reflected the similarity judgments people made. The correlations were strong.
How strong.
For the LLM, ChatGPT 3.5, it was 0.71. For the multimodal LLM, Gemini Pro Vision 1.0, it was 0.85. And for humans, it was 0.9.
Wow, okay. So that tells you the models aren't just guessing randomly.
Not at all. They're making structured, principled judgments.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. They have these 66 dimensions. Could they actually figure out what they meant? Like, what were the AIs actually paying attention to when they decided, okay, the car is the odd one out?
That was the crucial next step. And yes, remarkably, these dimensions were interpretable. They found that these AI models, both the language-only and the multimodal ones, develop conceptual representations of objects that, well, they share fundamental similarities with how humans understand things.
So you mentioned semantic clustering earlier. What does that look like in practice?
It means that within the 66-dimensional space they mapped out, objects from the same category just naturally clump together.
Like all the animals ended up in one corner of the map, so to speak.
Pretty much. Categories like animals, food, electronics, technology, these popped out universally. Humans, LLMs, MLLMs, they all recognize these groupings.
So there's a common conceptual ground there.
Definitely. It indicates a shared basis for how these systems are organizing the world.
And beyond those broad categories, what about more specific traits? Did the dimensions capture things like, shape or texture?
Yes, some did. Some dimensions clearly reflected those big semantic categories we just mentioned, like animal-related or food-related.
Huh.
But others captured more subtle things, conceptual or even perceptual traits. The researchers could assign intuitive labels to them,
Like what?
things like hardness, value, temperature, texture, even flatness, elongation, or aspects of color.
Huh. So you can almost picture the AI thinking about an object in terms of these qualities.
You can, yeah.
Yeah.
It suggests a much richer internal representation than just simple labels.
Were there differences, though, between how the humans and the AIs use these dimensions?
There were some interesting nuances, yes. The LLM and the MLLM, they tended to lean a bit more heavily on the semantic dimensions, the meaning-based ones.
Okay.
Humans, on the other hand, were a bit better at utilizing purely visual information, specific colors, shapes, textures that maybe the AI didn't pick up on as strongly.
That makes sense given our visual system.
It does. And interestingly, sometimes the AIs actually formed more specific categories than the humans did in the study.
Really? Like what?
Well, they might have distinct dimensions for vegetable-related things or headwear-related things.
Yeah.
Humans might just group those under a broader food or maybe clothing category.
Huh. So slightly different levels of granularity.
Exactly. But despite these differences, here's the kicker. A really significant chunk of these dimensions overlapped.
How many?
38 out of the 66 dimensions were found to be shared across all three systems, humans, the LLM, and the MLLM.
38 out of 66. That's a lot.
It really is. It strongly suggests there's this core set of conceptual schemas, these fundamental ways of organizing object knowledge that are common, whether you're human or one of these advanced AIs.
That's fascinating. What about efficiency? Did the models, or even humans, need all 66 dimensions to tell objects apart in this task?
That's another really cool finding. No, they didn't. To explain like 95 to 99% of their own odd one-out choices, the models were surprisingly efficient.
How
The LLM only needed, on average, about 3 to 8 dimensions per triplet. The MLLM needed 2 to 10, and humans used between 7 and 13.
So the AI models were sometimes even more efficient dimensionally than the humans.
In some cases, yes, in terms of the number of dimensions needed to explain their own behavior. It shows this remarkable efficiency in how knowledge gets represented in these systems. Maybe a kind of cognitive shortcut, like you said earlier.
Okay, the parallels in how they organize information are definitely striking, but does the similarity go deeper? Does it actually connect to what's physically happening inside our brains?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Can we see echoes of these AI representations, these dimensions, in actual human brain activity? And the study went there. They took the object embeddings from the AI models,
The fingerprints.
right, those 66-dimensional fingerprints, and compared them to neural activity patterns measured in human brains using fMRI, while people looked at similar objects.
And what did the fMRI data show? Did the AI representations line up with specific brain areas we know are involved in object recognition?
They did, and quite strongly. They found significant alignment between the model embeddings and the neural activity patterns in several key brain regions.
Which ones?
Areas like the EBA, the extrastriate body area, which lights up when we see bodies, or the PPA, the parahippocampal place area, active for scenes and places. Also the RSC, another scene area, and the FFA, the fusiform face area, which is crucial for recognizing faces.
Wow, so the AI's way of organizing objects actually resonated with these specialized processing centers in the human brain.
Exactly. It wasn't just a general correlation. It mapped onto these specific functional regions.
You mentioned earlier the multimodal LLM, the one that sees images and reads text, performed particularly well on the behavioral task. Did it also show a stronger brain connection?
It absolutely did. The MLLM, Gemini Provision 1.0, showed particularly strong alignment with the brain data. Just to give you a number, its representations correlated with brain activity, achieving about 85% of human-level performance in predicting those neural patterns.
85%. That's
Yeah.
really close.
It's very close. And it suggests that integrating that visual data alongside the linguistic data really enhances the robustness and the generalizability of the AI's representations. It brings them significantly closer to human cognition.
So, stepping back and looking at the big picture here, these findings seem to provide pretty compelling evidence, wouldn't you say? That the way these LLMs and MLLMs represent objects internally, while maybe not identical to ours, they share some really fundamental common
I
ground.
think that's fair to say. They reflect key aspects of human conceptual knowledge. It's almost like the AI, through learning, is starting to speak the same conceptual language your brain uses for understanding objects.
Not just mimicking, but actually learning the underlying structure.
That seems to be what the data suggests.
So we started off asking, can AI think like us about objects? And this deep dive, well, it's shown us that not only can they in many ways, but their internal maps of the world, their object representations. They're surprisingly similar to the core dimensions our own minds and brains use.
And this isn't just some, academic curiosity. It has real implications. Understanding these shared ways of representing objects, these schemas, could genuinely impact how we design human-machine interfaces.
How so?
Well, it could make AI systems feel much more intuitive, more natural to interact with.
Yeah, I can see that. Imagine an AI that really gets what you mean when you talk about an object, whether you're describing it with words or just showing it a picture.
Exactly. It informs how we build more human-like artificial cognitive systems. It could lead to much more seamless collaboration between people and AI.
It leaves you with a pretty provocative thought, doesn't it? As these models get better and better at capturing these human-like concepts, maybe the future of interacting with AI isn't so much about us rigidly programming or teaching them every little thing,
Hmm.
but maybe more about guiding them, like telling an AI, hey, for this task, focus on the redness dimension, or
Yeah.
think about the artificial versus natural aspect here.
Kind of like nudging their attention towards the dimensions we find most relevant for a given context.
Exactly, just aligning its reasoning with ours using these shared conceptual dimensions. How might that fundamentally change how we design AI, how we interact with it every day, and maybe even how we perceive artificial intelligence itself?